There are moments in life that arrive without warning, yet mark a permanent shift within us. Not with a loud explosion, not with a flood of tears, but with a silent shattering, as if the soul can no longer carry the weight for even one more minute. It is not sadness, not quite anger either. It is exhaustion down to the bone when we are worn out from trying to please others, live up to expectations, and keep everything fine while we are crumbling inside. It is in that seemingly broken moment that the true self begins to rise. Carl Jung called this the beginning of the individuation process, when the mask falls away and the raw, unacknowledged self starts to step into the light. That is also when a voice rises from deep within, clear and uncompromising. Enough. And in that simple yet heavy whisper, strength begins to return to us. Number 1. The moment we say enough. Not impulsive, but a call from the soul. Not all inner revolutions begin with a dramatic event. Sometimes they arrive in absolute silence. On a morning like any other, you wake up and realize you can't live like this anymore. There is no last straw, just a cold, cutting clarity, as if your soul has waited a long time to finally say it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The moment you say enough is not an emotional outburst. It is the moment the unconscious becomes conscious and you finally hear your voice. The act of saying enough is often misunderstood as a sign of weakness, as if someone has lost control. But in truth, it is the first sign that the will to live is returning, that the soul's energy, once drained by trying to maintain what no longer belongs to you, is beginning to rise again. Jung never saw crisis as a catastrophe. On the contrary, he saw it as a necessary turning point. In Modern Man, in Search of a Soul, he wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Consciousness cannot be born without some form of breakdown. When you say enough, you are refusing to remain paralyzed in old patterns. That is the moment you stop performing for the world." Think of a woman who has been in a marriage for nearly 20 years, where she constantly tried to keep the peace, stayed silent, and endured. She told herself that every family has problems, that if she just sacrificed a little more, her husband would change and love would return. But one night, in the stillness after everyone had gone to bed, she looked at herself in the mirror and no longer recognized the woman staring back. It wasn't tears that woke her up. It was numbness, the hollow realization that she had traded away her soul just to hold onto a shell. And then she said a single word, not shouted, not needing to be heard by anyone else. Enough. That was the moment she began to live. In Jungian psychoanalysis, the collective unconscious and archetypes rule our lives from the shadows. But sometimes, the unconscious stops whispering and starts to scream. That feeling often comes after long stretches of saying, "I'm fine," while inside, your heart is howling. You begin to notice recurring dreams, strange symbols surfacing in your mind, or simply an overwhelming sense of being lost. Jung called this true freedom, the path that starts by stopping, by facing yourself, and by finally saying what your heart has known for a long time. Enough. Number 2, enough. Not rebellion, but self-love. And when you say enough, when you rise from what once held you back without apologizing to anyone, it's not rebellion. It's self-love in its purest form. That act doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't need applause. It only needs you, the one person you must finally learn not to betray. We are often taught that loving yourself is selfish, that if you set boundaries, if you refuse to keep enduring, then you are changing or lacking compassion. But the truth is this: self-respect is not about mistreating others. It's about refusing to mistreat yourself. Carl Jung once wrote in The Undiscovered Self, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. To accept yourself, to value yourself, to love yourself. This is not instinct. It is a quiet revolution, soaked in sweat and tears." Have you ever spent your youth trying to please others? Always the agreeable one, the peacemaker, the first to say sorry, even when you weren't wrong. Have you ever stayed in a relationship just to avoid hurting the other person, even as you were being hurt every day? Maybe you got used to pushing aside your feelings, to keep the peace, to avoid drama, to be the good one. But at some point, the soul begins to scream, not because you're selfish, but because you've forgotten that you, too, are a human being, worthy of kindness like anyone else. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their souls." Many cling to painful situations simply because facing the truth feels even scarier. We often identify ourselves with our suffering because we've lived in it so long that we think it's normal. But that isn't love. That's deliberate confinement, where you slowly choke your own life to preserve the illusion that you're still good enough in someone else's eyes. I know, standing up and saying, "I will not endure this anymore," may be the hardest thing you've ever done. Because it doesn't just shatter a relationship, a job, or a habit. It shatters a version of yourself who's always tried to be the good one. But ask yourself this: are you truly living or just playing the lead in a script written by someone else? Maybe it's time to stop, to turn off the stage lights and look out into the empty theater where it's just you, alone, with a single, quiet question. Who am I when I'm no longer pretending? You're watching this video, perhaps because you're in that stage, or maybe you've already lived through it. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, am I living to be loved or just to be accepted? And is that worth the price I've paid? Carl Jung didn't see self-love as grand declarations of ego. In the depth of his teachings, self-love is the process of reuniting with the self, the deepest archetypal core within every person. He wrote in Psychological Types, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Meaning, there is no universal formula for life, and if you keep walking in someone else's shoes, you'll bleed and still have to smile. Once again, to love yourself, you must have the courage to say no. No to the roles society imposes on you. No to situations that shrink you so you can fit inside someone else's space. No to waiting for someone to finally see your worth when you can see it yourself right now. Self-love is not waiting to be chosen. It's daring to choose yourself. And you know what's the most beautiful thing that happens next? You begin to attract things that align with who you truly are. No more exhausting transactional relationships. No more silent sacrifices just to keep things smooth. You begin to live, not to please anyone, but to become someone you can proudly face in the mirror. If something inside you feels like it's shifting, if something in your heart aches a little right now, that might be the first call from the self. Don't ignore it. Don't rush to silence it with reason. Listen. And if you're brave enough, respond with one simple yet profound act. Choose yourself. Number 3. Decoding our attachment to pain. Not everything you call me truly belongs to you. There are parts of you, your reflexes, your thought patterns, your choices, that were not born from freedom, but from wounds that were never healed. You do not always become yourself through what you love, but often through what you learn to endure. And over time, you forget you weren't always like this. Let's go one level deeper, to the place not everyone dares to enter, where your identity is woven from your pain. This is the next stage in what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Carl Jung once wrote in The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, "What we are to our inward vision, and what man appears to be subspecie eternitatis, can only be expressed by way of myth. This isn't just philosophy. It's a wake-up call that some parts of ourselves, some truths about who we are, the unconscious craves familiarity, while the soul longs to evolve. And the two cannot coexist forever. At some point, you must choose. Will you cling to the safety of old wounds, or release them and step into an uncertain but authentic path? Will you live as who you used to be, or who you're capable of becoming? Take a moment now and reflect. Is there something in your life repeating, not because you love it, but because you're afraid to lose it? A type of person, a job, a relationship, a story you keep telling yourself? I'm not good enough. I need to try harder. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. These aren't truths. They're remnants of beliefs you were once made to accept and around which you've built your entire life. Carl Jung emphasized, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. You cannot wake up without hurting." Awakening requires peeling away the layers of masks and defenses buried deep in your nervous system. It means facing what once kept you alive is now holding you back. And letting go, as difficult as it may be, is the only doorway to your real self. If you find yourself caught in old cycles, don't blame yourself. Ask instead, what inner child is trying to be seen, to be loved? That's not weakness, it's a survival instinct. But your soul did not come here just to survive. It came to evolve. And that evolution begins the moment you dare to face your misguided attachment to pain and say one simple but powerful sentence: I no longer need this to survive. Number 4, the battle with the shadow. And when you begin letting go of the identities built from pain, another question quietly emerges. If I am no longer the one who suffers, who strives to be loved, then who am I? That is the moment you step into uncharted territory where the shadow begins to surface. Not as an enemy, but as a mirror reflecting the parts of you that even you once refused to see. Welcome to the battle with the shadow, the inner darkness. Carl Jung devoted much of his life to decoding this psychological entity, and he did not use the word shadow as a vague metaphor. For him, it was a living part of the psyche, with structure, memory, and a voice of its own. Jung wrote in Psychology and Religion, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. In other words, no one confronts their shadow without being shaken, because it is the part of us we've locked away throughout our development, where we've buried anger, envy, desire, helplessness, and even brilliance deemed inappropriate for the roles we were assigned." Imagine a woman who has always been seen as kind, the perfect mother, the friend who never gets angry. For years, she suppresses her emotions, smiles to keep the peace, and bows down to be loved. But one day, when her child slams the door and shouts, "You never understand me," her rage erupts like fire. She is terrified of herself. She can't understand how a single sentence could provoke near screaming. What she doesn't know is this: her shadow, her repressed anger, her need for respect, her yearning to be herself, has risen to demand a place. And it isn't wrong. It's a reminder that she, too, is human, not a role. If you're watching this video and recognize within yourself something ugly, irrational, or unfit, know that you are not alone. We all have a basement in the soul, a place where we hide what we're ashamed of, condemned by society, by family, or even by ourselves. Jung made this clear in Ion. To confront a person with his shadow is to show him his light, meaning only when we dare to face that darkness does our true light begin to emerge. But this process is not gentle. It's like a part of you dying, the part that learned to survive through silence, endurance, and avoidance. And that death hurts just as deeply as losing a loved one, because you are saying goodbye to yourself, or rather, to the version of you that once needed to exist to survive. But remember, as Jung affirmed in The Development of Personality, only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. The death of the old self is not the end. It is the beginning of rebirth. You may have wondered why rejection confuses you, even when it's small? Why does anger burst out when you're not heard? Why do you fear being truly seen? These reactions don't come from the present. They come from the shadow, from old experiences that were never released. But the good news is this: when you dare to name the shadow, you begin to reclaim power. You stop living in fear, you stop running, you stop performing. You become real, raw, but fully alive. Let me ask you this, and be honest. Is there something within you that you know is true, but you've always tried to hide? A trait? A desire? A piece of personal history? If so, understand that this isn't a part to eliminate, it's a part to understand. The shadow doesn't vanish if you ignore it. It only shifts form into misplaced anger, numbness, unconscious repetition in relationships. And then you wonder why life keeps longer control you. Have you ever felt that way? When a choice that's right for you makes you feel guilty. When you say no to an empty gathering or end a relationship that's become a burden and the other person reacts as if you've betrayed them. Carl Jung once wrote in The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious, "Resistance to the organized mass can be affected only by the man who is as well organized in his individuality as the mass itself." It means only when you are solidly anchored in yourself can you stand firm against the pull of the collective. And you will need to stand firm, because the old world does not go quietly. Those who once benefited from your silence will now accuse you. Those who relied on your compliance will rage when you begin to speak. They will call you cold, ungrateful, and selfish, not because you've become cruel, but because you no longer serve their storyline. And in those moments, your self-love will be tested, not in theory, but in action. You don't need to argue. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to prove you're still a good person. You only need to stay quiet and keep walking. Because those who truly love you, who love the most authentic parts of you, will not leave you just because you've become more honest with yourself. Pause and ask yourself, Who was the first to get angry when you started to change? Who made you feel guilty for choosing to live your truth? They are not the enemy. They are simply symbols of the old world, the world you once belonged to before you woke up. And you don't need to hate them. Just recognize you are no longer that person, and so you can no longer live by those same rules. Jung once said in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The greatest privilege of being alive is to become your true self. But the price is being misunderstood, opposed, and even left behind. And you must be willing to pay that price. Otherwise, you will live someone else's life, while your true self dies silently inside you. Leaving the old world is not easy, but it's necessary. It is a cleansing stage where you lose relationships that were never real, roles that no longer fit, situations you once believed were fate. But in truth, that loss is simply the price of living a real life. And remember, when you begin losing what no longer aligns, it is not the end. It is the clearing of the path, so that the people, opportunities, and love that match your new frequency can finally find you. Number 6. Moving through fear and the void. You've walked away. You've said, enough. You've cut the cord to the old roles, the old self, the old world. But now what? You're standing in the void, no longer clinging to the past, yet not seeing anything new on the horizon. This is the soul's desert. No maps, no instructions, just you and a vast silence. Don't fear it. Don't rush to fill it with something familiar, because it is precisely in this barren place that transformation begins. Carl Jung wrote a crucial truth in The Psychology of the Unconscious. The unconscious wants to flow into the conscious, but it finds the conscious full. It cannot enter. In other words, the unconscious can only rise when the conscious mind is empty enough to receive it. And that only happens when you've dared to let go. But this emptiness is terrifying, isn't it? It makes you feel lost, as if you've just left a collapsing house, only to stand in a wide open field with no bricks to begin again. In that moment, the unconscious starts to whisper, "Go back." At least there, you knew who you were. At least someone said your name. At least you didn't have to face this void. Do you hear that voice inside you? The one urging you to text your ex, to apologize, just to make things go back to normal, to slip back into an old role because it's better than being alone. That's not you. That's the part of your unconscious trained by fear. Jung once wrote in The Undiscovered Self, "Man is not free to choose the unconscious he inherits. But you do have the power to choose whether you'll continue serving it or rise beyond it. If you can stand firm in this void, if you don't rush back, don't fill your life with something just to numb the emptiness, something miraculous begins to unfold. The inner light, long obscured by noise, confusion, and misaligned relationships, starts to glow. You begin to hear your intuition again. You start to feel your sense of fullness. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to achieve anything. Just be present. I want you to picture this. You're standing alone in a forest after a storm. No sound. No one is calling your name. And then you realize you are still breathing. You can still place a hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat. You can still sense life, though no one is watching, praising, or demanding anything from you. That is wholeness. And it only shows up in the void. We often think of emptiness as something to avoid, But for Jung, it is a doorway into the depths of the soul. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, he wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but didn't drain your energy because you did too much, but because you gave too much to things that didn't deserve it. You invested emotions in people who couldn't reciprocate. You stayed in jobs that didn't nourish your soul. You said yes to relationships that made you shrink. And each time, a part of your life force was quietly siphoned off, steadily, silently, like blood dripping from a wound you didn't notice. Carl Jung stated this clearly in The Practice of Psychotherapy. Energy is the fundamental concept of psychology, and all psychological events involve energy to some degree. This means that everything in your inner life, bad decisions, silent endurance, the act of suffering to be loved, all consume psychic energy. When you resist the call of your soul, you lose not only your peace, but the very vitality that makes you feel alive. But when you pause, turn inward, and step away from the roles that no longer fit, an energy you thought was lost begins to return. You don't need to do anything to summon it. It comes back because you've stopped the leaks. Like a stream clearing when you remove the rocks that block it. You find yourself less tired, less reactive, and less hungry for validation. Every action, every word, every decision now begins to emerge from within, not from fear of lack. I want you to remember the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not to impress, not to win praise, not to keep someone from leaving. Maybe it was reading a book because it brought you joy, writing music, dancing alone in the living room. These moments seem small, but they are when your original energy returns. Jung called this reconnecting with the self, the complete, integrated self that holds not only the ego, but also the unconscious, the shadow, and your creative potential. In the relations between the ego and the unconscious, he wrote, "The self is a quantity that is supraordinate to the conscious ego. It embraces not only the conscious but also the unconscious psyche. And what comes next is almost always the same. Clarity. Things that used to confuse you become obvious. People who once burdened you now feel weightless. There's nothing left to grip, to force, to chase. You're no longer pulled into emotional tug-of-wars, no longer drawn to those who appear, disappear, and reappear. You stop trying to understand others so deeply that you lose yourself, because now you are full within. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop apologizing for your growth. You stop ignoring your intuition to please others. At this stage, self-love is no longer a concept, it's a standard. It shows in what you eat, who you meet, where you stay, when you leave. Not to prove anything, but because you know you deserve a life that is in harmony with your truth. If you're starting to feel this calm, this clarity, this fullness, pause for a few seconds and recognize it. Don't rush into the next thing on the list, just breathe. And know this is your reward. Not because you're enlightened, but because you were brave enough to let go. And when you let go of what isn't yours, you lose nothing, you reclaim yourself. Jung once wrote in The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration." You don't need to become someone else. You simply need to call back the parts you once abandoned. Your energy, your vitality, your trust, your intuition, and let them all coexist within you. That is healing. That is rebirth. That is freedom. Number 8. Inner transformation changes the outer world. Imagine walking into a room that used to feel familiar. The same lights, the same people, the same old conversations. But this time, you no longer feel like you belong. Not because the room has changed, but because you have. The way you see, the way you feel, the way you exist, now comes from an entirely new level of energy you can no longer ignore. This is one of the most mysterious and powerful things that happens after you restore your energy and reconnect with your true self. The external world begins to change, not because you force it to, but because you're no longer radiating your old energy. Carl Jung once wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate." In other words, what remains unconscious within you will repeat outside of you as if it were fate. But when you begin to illuminate your inner world, that fate no longer recurs. You once believed you had to try harder to be loved, to tolerate more to maintain a relationship, to hide your true self to avoid abandonment. But once you are full from within, you stop straining, stop bargaining. You no longer enter a room needing to be seen, but with the peace of someone who has already seen themselves. This doesn't mean life suddenly becomes perfect, but you'll begin to notice very specific changes. People who once drained your energy will quietly fade away, not because you hate them, but because your frequency no longer matches theirs. New job opportunities emerge. That's not you becoming too picky. That's you resetting the frequency of your life, and life, with its strange intelligence, is responding. Carl Jung didn't believe in surface-level change. He believed in deep, inner transformation, and that everything you experience outside is merely the result of that. When you heal the inner world, you don't have to look for miracles. You become the miracle. If you're still watching at this moment, chances are you've already taken your first steps on the journey back to yourself. It isn't easy, it isn't fast, but it is real. Because, as Jung once emphasized, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Loving yourself isn't about taping a few positive affirmations to your wall. It's about having the courage to face the truth, to let go of what no longer fits, to endure loneliness, to let an old version of yourself die so the real you can step into the light. And it all begins with one seemingly small but deeply powerful moment, when you look at your life and say, enough. If you've ever been there, collapsed, empty, and pulled yourself up on your strength, then you carry within you a kind of light the world needs. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Because out there, someone still thinks they're the only one who feels lost. They don't need advice. They need to see that someone has made it through the darkness and is still standing, still living, and most importantly, still choosing to love themselves. So if this message has reached you, share it. Not to spread something pretty, but to offer a hand. Because light doesn't grow when you keep it to yourself. Light grows when you give it away, as a quiet message. I've been there, and you can make it through too. And that is how we heal, not alone, but together. Have you ever noticed that the more you try to explain, hold on, or console a man after wounding his pride, the further he drifts away? Yet, strangely enough, there are moments when, by wounding his ego, he begins to change. Not ignoring you, but pursuing you. Not indifferent, but seemingly driven to prove something to you. This is not a mere coincidence. It is a profound psychological mechanism that Carl Jung, the legendary psychoanalyst, uncovered over a century ago. Jung discovered that behind the strong, rational, and controlled exterior of a man lies a primal wound, an unconscious part that constantly fears it is not good enough, not worthy, not recognized. And when you, intentionally or unintentionally, touch that wound, you don't just cause pain. You awaken an ancient drive within him, the drive to prove his worth, to reclaim admiration, to be worthy of love. So how do you stand in the right place when his ego is wounded, not to punish him, but to awaken true love? Stay until the end, for we are not only exploring how to make a man love you, but how to become the woman who inspires him to love himself more deeply than ever before. Number 1. The male ego. Carl Jung once likened the ego to a gatekeeper of the soul. It is not the entirety of one's being, but the part that guards the boundary between the outer world and the inner world. For a man, the ego is not merely a psychological mechanism. It is a sacred domain where honor, strength, and the idealized image of himself reside. But precisely because it is sacred, it is also surprisingly fragile, prone to shattering. From childhood, a man is taught to be strong, to excel, to control his emotions and circumstances. Crying is a weakness. Losing is humiliation. Being wrong is failure. The world tells him that to be loved, he must be a winner. No one teaches him how to fail without losing his worth, or gives him space to be both vulnerable and still worthy of respect. And so, the ego forms like a fortress, solid on the outside, hollow and trembling within. Imagine a warrior standing on a battlefield. On the outside, there is armor, weapons, and an air of unwavering resolve. But deep inside, there may be a frightened child, terrified of being exposed as not good enough, not masculine enough, not capable of making anyone proud. The ego is that armor. And when it is wounded, especially by the woman he desires, not only is the armor scratched, but the deepest, most hidden wound may be laid bare. Jung called this the primal wound, a part of the collective unconscious of men. It doesn't stem from a specific mother, a harsh father, or a personal failure. It is a shared scar of masculine humanity, the fear that I am worthless unless I can prove something. This fear doesn't vanish as a man matures. On the contrary, it is only concealed more skillfully through success, status, stoicism, or silence. A friend of mine, a CEO of a large company, is seen by others as the epitome of masculinity, confident, composed, decisive. But in an intimate conversation, when asked what hurt him most in a relationship, he replied without hesitation, "It's when she looks at me as if I'm ordinary. Just one look, not an insult. Just a glance of disappointment. At the moment, he needed trust." From that point, love ceases to be a refuge and becomes another scale on which he must measure up. And when love stops being a sanctuary for his being, the ego contracts and the emotional connection begins to crack. It sounds fragile, doesn't it? But that's precisely why the male ego cannot bear disappointment from the woman he cherishes most. He can handle criticism from a boss or rejection from society. But when the eyes of the woman who once admired him quietly question his worth, that is the point of collapse. Jung said, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." But in love, the tragedy runs deeper. It is when a man's ego is not allowed to be vulnerable and thus never heals. So, how do you, as an awakened woman, step into that terrain? Not to avoid wounding the ego, not to tiptoe around it, but to recognize when you stand at the crossroads of choice, to make him defensive or to awaken a higher self within him through understanding, well-placed challenge, and deep respect for his fears. And one final thing to remember: the male ego is not weak. It has simply never been allowed to be weak in safety. It is like a child tasked with being a warrior too soon, never asked, "Are you okay?" When you understand this, you no longer feel anger when he turns cold, lashes out, or pulls away. You realize it is the ego crying out for help. And in that moment, you have a choice: to be the one who makes him retreat, or the one who helps him begin to shed his armor. For true love is not about winning a battle against the male ego. True love is standing beside that ego when it is wounded, not drowning it, nor saving it, but simply being there and seeing it. Number 2, anima. Why then do you, a woman like any other, have the power to touch the deepest recesses of a man's soul? The answer lies beyond his ego, where another figure resides, an invisible yet potent force that guides how he loves, how he hurts, and how he yearns for a woman. Jung called this the anima, the feminine shadow within a man's soul. The anima is not a fleeting emotion, nor is it a feminine preference or weakness as we might assume. The anima is the primal image of the goddess that a man harbors in his unconscious, woven from his mother's lullabies, the first glance that made his heart skip a beat, the hazy frames of films, the dreams that linger, the strokes of paintings, the verses of poetry, and those moments when he stood captivated by something he couldn't quite explain. Carl Jung described it as the internal feminine archetype, a part of his soul present from the beginning, not meant to love outwardly, but to rediscover himself through the reflection of another. This may sound abstract, but it is profoundly real. The anima is the archetype a man unconsciously projects onto a woman in the real world. He doesn't love you for you alone. He loves you when something in you strikes a primal nerve, making him feel a familiarity he cannot name. The anima is an ancient mirror in his mind, and when you pass by and your reflection aligns, if only in a glance, a word, a subtle gesture, he is spellbound. He loves like a sleepwalker, led by a call deeper than desire, the call to return to a self he has never fully lived. In that moment, love becomes a ritual. He is no longer just a man pursuing a woman. He is a pilgrim standing before the temple of his soul, trembling before an image both foreign and profoundly familiar, realizing that all these years, what he sought was not out there, but rising from within him, through you. You may have seen this in a look from him, as if he no longer sees you but gazes through you to something more sacred. Or you may have felt a shift. Yesterday he was indifferent, but after a single phrase, a laugh, or something you did, he seems awakened. That is the moment his anima stirs and recognizes you as its reflection. If you've ever seen that look, the one where he seems to meet himself through you, leave a comment below. I've seen that look. Let other women know they are not alone. From the perspective of depth psychology, this carries vital significance. A man does not truly love you as a separate individual, but because you awaken a part of his soul that has yet to be fully lived. At its deepest level, love is an act of inner ego, not because of who you are, but because in your presence, he feels himself becoming clearer, more alive, more valuable. Picture a hidden gate buried underground, forgotten since childhood. Above it, grass has grown, dust has settled, and layers of earth have covered it. A man lives his entire life unaware of the treasure buried beneath him. Then one day, he meets you, and your voice resonates with the frequency of the lock. Something in the way you walk, look up, breathe softly, or fall silent touches that unconscious code, and the gate swings open. This is why some men become inexplicably obsessed with a woman they've only met a few times. She doesn't fit his usual standards or ideal type, yet something about her pulls him in. It's not because she's weak, but because she embodies something he cannot name but has always longed for. However, Jung also warned, projecting the anima is a double-edged sword. Refusing to flatten it to please or suppress her individuality to be accepted, she becomes a spiritual guide, not just a lover. Number 3. 3 psychological keys to awakening love after hurting his ego. Key 1. The mirror of the soul. Carl Jung once said, "We are not what happened to us, we are what we choose to become." There is a profound truth that few dare to face. A man does not love you because you are perfect, but because in your presence, he sees an incomplete yet magnificent part of himself. He does not love perfection. He loves the possibility of becoming something greater through the way you see him. But no one can become anything without first seeing that potential reflected from somewhere outside themselves. In love, a woman becomes the first and deepest mirror, not a mirror of outward appearances, but a mirror of the soul. The mirror of the soul is when you look at a man not with judgment or expectation, but with a gaze that sees the dormant essence within him. the part he may not dare believe exists. When you look beyond the social mask, the defensive armor, the facade of the ego, and say with your quiet presence, "I see you. I see the part of you that you've forgotten." At the deepest level, every man carries an invisible battle between who he is and who he could become. This battle cannot be won through individual effort alone. It requires someone to touch the unexpressed, unnamed part of him, to open the door to the confidence needed to step into his true self. That is where the mirror of the soul comes in. Imagine a small ember buried under ash in a dark corner of the soul, its light faint, nearly extinguished. Then a gentle breeze passes at just the right moment, and the ember flares to life. You are that breeze, not because you blow forcefully, but because you recognize the flame's existence while the world sees only a cold shell. I once heard a woman share that she said something simple to her partner. "I think you're living below your true potential." It was a gentle observation, spoken from a place of deep trust. Remarkably, the man fell silent, then began to change, little by little. For the first time, someone didn't just see what he did, but saw who he could become. From a psychological perspective, this mechanism is tied to the concept of reflecting the ideal self. Every man carries an idealized image of himself in his mind, stronger, greater, living with a deeper purpose. But as he grows, society, expectations, and failures blur that image. When a woman arrives and sees and believes in that higher version of him, his nervous system awakens. The desire to prove himself, to rise, to become the person you believe he can be, becomes more powerful than any other motivation. Jung described this phenomenon as follows: when a woman looks at a man with eyes that see his future self, he will either live to be worthy of that gaze or be haunted by his inability to do so. This is not pressure, it is a summons. You do not push him forward. You call him back to his true self, beyond the social ego. This is entirely different from praising what he has already achieved. Admiration for current accomplishments only reinforces the ego, while belief in his deeper essence awakens his soul. Between two women, one who says, "You're so talented," and another who says, "I see you could be even greater than this," a man will be drawn to the latter, not because she demands more, but because she sees what he has not yet dared to claim for himself. Understanding the mirror of the soul is one thing. Becoming that mirror in real life, subtly, sincerely, without imposition, is a profound psychological art. This is not about inflating a man's ego to make him feel better. It is about how you show up, so that the higher self within him is activated, not through flattery, but through a quiet belief that he can become something greater. First, observe not to judge, but to see through. When the man you love shares about his work, goals, or efforts, don't rush to praise or nod absent-mindedly. Listen with an open mind, asking questions that guide him toward his dreams. Instead of asking, "What do you do for work?" ask, "If money or expectations didn't limit you, what would you want to do?" Instead of asking, "How much does this project earn?" ask, "Does it reflect who you truly are?" These questions compel him to reconnect with the unfinished parts of his soul, to touch the version of himself he once dreamed of and may have forgotten. When he speaks, don't interrupt with commentary. Pause a beat longer than usual. Look at him not as someone merely listening, but as someone shining a light on his potential. Then say one thing, but make it precise. For example, I don't just see how capable you are. I see you could create something truly great if you trusted yourself as much as I trust you. Spoken from genuine observation, those words will linger in his mind longer than any compliment. Psychologically, this moment triggers an intrinsic reflex tied to the ideal self. When the brain receives a signal that I can be a better version, it produces dopamine and a mild surge of adrenaline, sparking a desire to act. But if that signal comes from someone grass, droplets on lips, and cool skin, it becomes a haunting memory. You are that rain. When you show up in the authentic rhythm of your own life, not always there, not always answering, not always giving your full attention, you create the necessary space for a man to feel the true value of your presence. From a psychological perspective, this is tied to the mechanism of intermittent reinforcement, a neurological principle that causes the brain to release more dopamine when rewards are unpredictable and irregular. This same principle makes people addicted to gambling, lotteries, and to those who are not always easy to grasp. When you show up in a way that is not entirely predictable, you are not playing games. You are activating the brain's regions tied to attention, desire, and deep memory. A woman once shared, she used to respond instantly to every text from the man she loved. She was always available, always initiating, always trying to stay connected, thinking it showed care. But the more she did so, the more indifferent he became. It wasn't until she began focusing on herself, simply living true to her schedule, passions, and rhythm, that he started seeking her out, asking more, yearning to step into her world. Because when you stop being a space waiting for him to fill and instead become a world in motion with its rhythm, depth, and secrets not easily accessed, a man no longer sees you as available. He sees you as a universe he must learn to approach, one he must be worthy to enter. This leads to a critical truth. Presence is not about frequency, but depth. You can be there every day, yet still feel distant from a man. And you can disappear for 3 days, but return with a timely message, a layered glance, and pull him back as if he never escaped your initial allure. Think of an ancient forest. No one can explore it in a single stroll. Each return reveals light falling at a different angle, mist settling differently, and new scents emerging. You don't need to do much, just avoid being fully available. For what is there to explore in a forest where turning on a light reveals everything? Jung called this part of individuation, the process where each person learns to hold their essence rather than dissolving into another. Many women, when in love, unconsciously merge themselves into the man. But this very merging erases the primal attraction. If you are no longer yourself, mysterious, distinct, independent, you cease to be something he needs to pursue, becoming instead an unwanted byproduct of accessibility. True love does not come from always being present, but from your presence carrying the energy of something valuable. When you live a rich, inspired life, nourished by things independent of you, your relationships, passions that make you lose track of time, and dreams you quietly pursue, you truly live for yourself. And a man senses this deeply, instinctively, in a way he cannot articulate. The first practice of this principle is not about pretending to be busy, but about truly having a life that no one, not even the man you love, can fully claim. A life with its rhythm, unbound by when his texts arrive or who calls you at midnight. Return to what once captivated you before anyone entered your world. Art, nature, meditation, writing, relationships that nurture you without conditions. When you rebuild your inner world like a garden not open to the masses, you don't need to play hard to get. Its very seclusion is what makes a man feel that in your presence, he is not the one bestowing light, but the one invited to explore. And if that garden still has corners he has not seen, he will return, not because you hold him, but because you are a place he has yet to fully understand. But a caution: this only holds power when it comes from authentic living, not emotional manipulation. If you ignore texts just to get attention, that energy will be felt. But if you don't respond because you're genuinely immersed in something that nourishes you, that energy carries through far more powerfully. This allure comes not from lack, but from a fullness that is not easily touched. Like the moon, you don't need to shine constantly or always be full, yet each time you appear, you make the sky soulful, drawing eyes upward in awe. When you live in your cycles, you do not fear absence, for you know each moment of your presence carries the weight of someone who chose herself first, then chose to stand beside another. Key 3. Facing the shadow. But is presence alone enough? Is a loving gaze sufficient to keep a man by your side when the deepest part of him trembles, awaiting discovery? The truth is, not every light leads to love. Some flames only burn when you dare to step into the darkness that others have hidden in their entire lives. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. No one grows by cloaking themselves in false radiance. True growth happens when we dare to face the parts we've avoided, the vulnerable, the failed, the not good enough, the parts we hide to remain lovable. For a man, this darkness runs deeper, whole human being. A woman once shared that while dating a man who seemed outwardly solid, successful, and in control, she noticed something strange. Whenever they grew emotionally closer, he would suddenly turn cold. Not out of boredom, but as if an automatic mechanism shut his inner door. When she stopped pressing him to share, and instead spoke about herself, about the times she feared no one would love her if she revealed the chaos in her mind, he began to speak, hesitantly, about a childhood of being abandoned by his mother, a lingering fear that if he lost control, he would be left behind. She didn't say, "Everything will be okay." She didn't rush to soothe. She simply said, "Thank you for telling me. You're allowed to be vulnerable." And in that moment, he cried for the first time in front of a woman, not out of weakness, but because someone finally saw his wound and stayed. This is the power of a woman who faces the shadow, not trying to change the man, not preaching wisdom, not playing mother or therapist. Simply being present as a real human who has faced her darkness and thus does not fear it. This presence isn't created by rote kindness. It comes from having sat alone with your pain without running away. When you speak of it calmly, not seeking pity, not demanding healing, you send an unconscious signal. You can show me who you are, and I won't panic. You don't need to be a blazing light shining into his darkness. That would only blind him and make him retreat further. Be an underground river, quiet, patient, but strong enough to erode the walls he doesn't even know he's built. If these words resonate with something deeply true within you, don't forget to like or subscribe, so these insights can reach more women on the journey to make love deeper and more healing, beyond mere desire or psychological games. We're not just talking about men, we're exploring ourselves through how we're reflected in another's eyes. So, the first practice, start with yourself. Ask, have I truly faced my own shadow? If you haven't touched your fears, wounds, or hidden shame, when a man reveals his, your instinct may be to avoid, ignore, or try to fix. But if you've sat with those emotions, you won't need lofty words. You'll simply be present with the energy of someone who has walked through darkness and knows it doesn't kill. Next, become a space where he doesn't need to hide. When a man begins to show vulnerability through words, a fleeting look, or an unguarded comment like, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," your first response should be a quality silence. Just sit there, letting that fragile moment exist without extinguishing it. Then, open up first. Touch your darkness to unlock his. When you sense he's ready to go further, share a piece of your truth with sincerity. "I get it. I was once too scared to admit I felt alone, afraid others would see me as weak." This isn't sharing for pity. It's leading the way. You step into the dark first, not with a flashlight, but with the courage to be human. And most crucially, when the conversation ends and he returns to you, receive him as if nothing went wrong. When he comes back to the conversation, the relationship, the closeness, don't revisit his pain as proof of intimacy. Move forward as if his ability to be himself around you is natural. Don't elevate your worth for being there when he was weak as a form of manipulation. Simply be there, like steady ground that holds no regrets. In an era where love easily becomes strategy, the most miraculous thing you can do is live so authentically that you transcend strategy. Be a woman who doesn't chase perfection, but depth. You're not here to heal him. You're not knocking on every door in his underground city, preaching lessons of freedom. You are simply an unnamed passage, quiet enough to make him choose to enter. No invitation needed, no wide-open gates, just presence in the right place, at the right time, with a heart unafraid. If something in this video made you reflect on yourself or reminded you of a man who touched a crack within you, subscribe and turn on notifications today to catch our next videos that guide you back to yourself. If this video felt meaningful to you, leave a sign below. And here's a question for you to sit with, one that could transform your journey ahead if you dare answer it with your heart. Are you ready to embark on the path of understanding yourself and awakening the wholeness within?